She stood trembling in a room of billionaires as they laughed at her milky, sightless eyes. They called her a street rat, mocking the heavy, rusted pendant around her neck. But the laughter died the second the city's most ruthless crime boss walked in, fell to his knees, and whispered, "Principessa." The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel in Manhattan smelled of old money, Baccarat Rouge perfume, and cruelty. Under the light of 3 massive crystal chandeliers, the Kensington Foundation's annual charity gala was in full swing. For the ultra-wealthy attendees, it was a night to sip $1,000 champagne and pretend they cared about the city's underprivileged. But for 22-year-old Nora Montgomery, it was simply a desperate attempt to make rent. Nora sat at the glossy Steinway grand piano in the corner of the room, her slender fingers dancing flawlessly over the ivory keys. She was playing Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, her mind lost in the melancholic beauty of the music. It was the only place she truly felt safe. At the age of 7, a catastrophic house fire had stolen her parents and her vision, leaving her in a world of perpetual darkness. Since then, her life had been a grueling sequence of harsh foster homes and agonizing survival. She navigated her lightless world through sound, touch, and intuition. Tonight, she was invisible, exactly how she preferred it. The agency had hired her for a mere $300 to provide background music. She wore a simple, faded black dress that had been washed too many times, a stark contrast to the sea of custom Dior and Tom Ford surrounding her. But in high society, the invisible inevitably become targets. God, could this music be any more depressing? The sharp, nasal voice cut through the ambient chatter. Nora's fingers faltered slightly, hitting a discordant key. She recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to Valerie Kensington, the host's daughter, a spoiled, vicious socialite who viewed anyone with a net worth under 8 figures as a peasant. "I think she's trying to make us feel sorry for her, Val," a male voice chuckled. It was Gregory Hayes, Valerie's fiancé, a hedge fund heir with a reputation for arrogance. Nora took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady her hands. "Just finish the set," she told herself. Just 3 more minutes. But Valerie was bored, and a bored heiress is a dangerous thing. She sauntered over to the piano, her silk gown rustling against the polished marble floor. "Hey, Beethoven," Valerie sneered, tapping her manicured nails sharply against the mahogany lid of the Steinway. The jarring sound made Nora flinch. "Can you play something upbeat? Or does being blind mean you only know how to play funeral dirges?" A ripple of cruel laughter erupted from the small entourage that had followed Valerie. I apologize, Miss Kensington," Nora said softly, her sightless, milky blue eyes fixed straight ahead. "I was instructed to play classical arrangements. I can switch to Mozart if you prefer." "I prefer you to stop ruining my evening," Valerie snapped. She leaned closer, her expensive floral perfume suffocating Nora. "Look at you. Did my father hire you just to get a tax write-off? You look like you crawled out of a storm drain. And what is that hideous thing?" Before Nora could react, Valerie's cold fingers hooked around the heavy silver chain resting against Nora's collarbone. With a violent tug, Valerie pulled the hidden pendant out from beneath the fabric of Nora's dress. It was a heavy, tarnished silver medallion. Despite the soot and rust that had darkened it over 15 years, the intricate engraving of a roaring lion gripping a massive blood-red ruby in its jaw was unmistakable. It was the only thing Nora had left of her father, a necklace he had placed around her neck the very night the fire consumed their home. He had told her to never take it off. "Don't touch that!" Nora gasped, her hands flying up to protect the medallion. Valerie scoffed, swatting Nora's hands away. "Is this supposed to be jewelry? It looks like a cheap prop from a medieval flea market. Honestly, Greg, look at this junk. It clashes with the pity she's trying to evoke." "It's completely classless," Gregory agreed, stepping up beside Valerie. "But what do you expect from a blind street rat? She probably stole it." "Give it back," Nora whispered, her voice trembling. She stood up from the piano bench, her hands frantically patting the surface of the piano to find her folded white cane. "Or what?" Valerie challenged maliciously. She took a step back, dragging the heavy chain so that Nora was forced to stumble forward to avoid being choked. Nora's foot caught the edge of the piano pedal. Without her cane to balance her, she pitched forward, crashing onto the hard marble floor. Her palms scraped painfully against the stone, and her sheet music, which she didn't need to read, but kept as a professional courtesy, scattered everywhere. The crowd didn't gasp. They laughed. "Oh, careful," Valerie mocked loudly, drawing the attention of the wider ballroom. I guess she didn't see the floor right in front of her. Nora knelt on the cold marble, her cheeks burning with hot, humiliating tears. She ran her hands desperately over the floor, searching for her cane. Her fingers brushed against a pair of patent leather shoes, and she recoiled as Gregory kicked her cane a few feet further away. "Let's see if she can fetch it," Gregory smirked. Nora's heart pounded in her chest like a trapped bird. She felt the heavy weight of 100 gazes on her, dissecting her dignity, mocking her disability. She clutched the tarnished medallion to her chest, curling into herself, wishing the ground would open up and swallow her whole. But then, the atmosphere in the room violently shifted. It didn't happen slowly. It was instantaneous. The string quartet across the room abruptly stopped playing. The low hum of 100 conversations died in the span of 3 seconds. The laughter evaporated. The clinking of crystal glasses ceased. Even in her darkness, Nora could feel the suffocating drop in temperature. The air grew heavy, thick with a sudden primal terror. Heavy, methodical footsteps echoed against the marble, moving in from the grand entrance. They were accompanied by the synchronized steps of at least a dozen other men, but one set of footsteps stood out, authoritative, unhurried, and dripping with lethal confidence. "Oh my God," someone whispered in the distance, their voice trembling. "It's him! It's Vitiello!" Valerie's cruel smile vanished. Gregory visibly stiffened, the color draining from his face. Luciano Vitiello had arrived. At 32, Luciano was a phantom of the New York underworld and the undisputed head of the Vitiello syndicate. He was a man who owned senators, controlled the eastern seaboard ports, and governed a criminal empire built on ruthlessness and absolute loyalty. Standing 6'3" in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit, he looked like a dark god carved from obsidian and violence. A jagged, faded scar ran from his left temple down to his jawline, a permanent reminder of the blood it took to secure his throne. He had not been invited to the Kensington Gala. He did not need an invitation anywhere in this city. Luciano stopped. His dark, cold eyes swept the ballroom, pinning the city's elite like butterflies to a board. No one dared to breathe. Then his gaze landed on the center of the room. He saw Valerie Kensington. He saw Gregory Hayes. And then he saw the frail, blind girl kneeling on the floor amidst scattered sheet music, desperately clutching a tarnished silver chain. Valerie, desperate to salvage her dignity and prove her importance, plastered on a sickeningly sweet smile. She smoothed down her Dior gown and took a step toward the imposing Mafia Boss. Mr. Vitiello, Valerie said, her voice overly bright and shrill in the dead, silent room. What an unexpected and absolute honor. My father will be thrilled you came. Please ignore the disturbance. The hired help is incredibly clumsy today. We were just having her removed. Luciano did not look at Valerie. He didn't even acknowledge she had spoken. His eyes were locked, with a terrifying intensity, on Nora's chest. From across the room, the dim chandelier light caught the blood-red ruby, clamped in the jaws of the tarnished silver lion. Underneath the bespoke suit, Luciano's heart stopped dead in his chest. His breathing hitched, a microscopic break in his iron composure that only his top lieutenant, Matteo, noticed. Il cuore di leone. The lion's heart. It was impossible. That necklace had been lost 15 years ago in a blaze of fire and blood. It was the ancestral crest of the Leonardi family, the Vitiello family's greatest allies. 15 years ago, a rival cartel, Hediptur, had ambushed the Leonardi compound, burning it to the ground. Lorenzo Leonardi, Luciano's godfather and the man who had stepped in front of a bullet to save Luciano's own father, had died in that fire alongside his wife and their 7-year-old daughter. Or so the world thought. Luciano's jaw clenched so tight the muscles ticked beneath his scarred cheek. He began to walk. The crowd parted violently, billionaires and socialites scrambling backward to get out of his path. Valerie beamed, thinking Luciano was walking toward her. But the Mafia Boss walked right past the heiress, the air freezing in his wake. Luciano stopped squarely in front of Nora. Nora froze. She couldn't see the giant of a man towering over her, but she could feel the sheer, overwhelming gravity of his presence. She smelled his cologne, a sharp, intoxicating blend of dark bergamot, leather, and faint gun smoke. The ambient heat radiating from him was intense. "Get her out of his way," Gregory hissed to a nearby security guard, terrified that the blind girl's presence would offend the Mafia Boss. "Grab her. Touch her." Luciano's voice resonated for the first time. It was a deep, gravelly baritone that sent shivers down the spine of every person in the room. "And I will sever your hands at the wrists." The security guard froze in his tracks, going pale. Gregory swallowed hard, retreating a step. Slowly, deliberately, Luciano sank to one knee, ruining the crease of his $5,000 trousers against the hard marble. Nora trembled, instinctively shrinking back. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her milky eyes wide with blind panic. "I dropped my cane. I can't find my way out." Luciano ignored the apology. He reached out, his large black leather-gloved hand gently picking up the heavy silver medallion resting against her collarbone. Nora gasped, but the warmth of his fingers against her skin was surprisingly tender, completely at odds with the violent aura he projected. Luciano turned the pendant over in his palm. His thumb brushed over the hidden engraving on the back. It read, "Sangue del mio sangue." Blood of my blood. It was real. Luciano's dark, dangerous eyes slowly moved up from the medallion to Nora's face. He took in her delicate features, the soot-like dark hair framing her pale face, and the milky blue of her sightless eyes. The fire that had supposedly killed her, had stolen her sight instead. She had survived. Lorenzo's daughter had survived, abandoned to a life of poverty and blindness while the city's elite mocked her. A monstrous, unholy rage ignited in the pit of Luciano's stomach, dark and absolute. But when he spoke, his voice was frighteningly calm. "What is your name?" Luciano asked softly. "Nora," she stammered, her voice tiny. Nora Montgomery. No, it isn't, Luciano murmured, the words meant only for her. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The intimate gesture sent shockwaves through the watching crowd. The ruthless butcher of New York was touching the blind pianist like she was made of spun glass. Your name is Eleonora Leonardi, and you have been lost for far too long. Nora's breath caught in her throat. Eleonora. No one had called her that since the night of the fire. How do you know that name? She whispered, her hands shaking. Because, Principessa, Luciano said, shifting his grip to take both of her trembling, scraped hands in his large, warm ones. I am the man who has spent 15 years looking for you. Luciano stood up, effortlessly pulling Nora to her feet with him. He wrapped a thick, protective arm around her waist, anchoring her to his side. For the first time in 15 years, Nora felt something she had entirely forgotten. Safe. Then Luciano turned his head to look at Valerie and Gregory. The tenderness vanished, replaced by the eyes of a predator who had just found prey. The temperature in the room seemed to plunge below freezing. You, Luciano said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet register. He pointed a gloved finger at Gregory. You kicked her cane. Gregory threw his hands up, stuttering violently. Mr. Vitiello, I didn't know she was with you. I swear to God it was just a joke. It was a misunderstanding. A joke, Luciano repeated flatly. He snapped his fingers. Instantly, his lieutenant, Matteo, stepped forward, kicking the back of Gregory's knees. With a sickening thud, the wealthy hedge fund heir crashed to the floor, forced to kneel exactly where Nora had been moments before. Valerie shrieked, backing away in horror. Mr. Vitiello, please, we didn't know. Didn't know what, Miss Kensington? Luciano took a slow, terrifying step forward, keeping Nora tucked safely against his side. That you were mocking the sole surviving heir of the Leonardi family. That you were humiliating a woman whose bloodline built half this city. He paused, his gaze burning into Valerie's terrified eyes. Or didn't you know that I protect what is mine? Valerie burst into tears, her foundation cracking under the weight of her panic. I'm sorry. I'll buy her a new dress. I'll write a check to her agency. Name the price. Luciano tilted his head, a dark, humorless smile touching his lips. Money. How predictably pathetic. He looked down at the shattered glass of champagne Valerie had purposefully dropped earlier. Get on your hands and knees, Valerie. Valerie gasped, looking around at the silent, horrified crowd of her peers. No one moved to help her. Please, she sobbed. On your knees, Luciano commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. Trembling uncontrollably, the heiress sank in her custom Dior gown onto the marble floor. Now, Luciano said coldly, pick up the glass, every single shard, with your bare hands. Valerie wailed, but the silent, lethal stare of the Mafia Boss gave her no choice. As she began to frantically gather the sharp splinters, slicing her manicured fingers, Luciano turned his attention away, dismissing them like the garbage they were. He looked down at Nora, the hard lines of his face softening instantly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a pristine silk handkerchief, gently wiping the dirt and faint traces of blood from her scraped palms. Come with me, Eleonora, he murmured, his voice rich and steady. Your nightmare is over. Nora clutched the lion pendant, her unseeing eyes welling with fresh tears. But this time, they were not tears of humiliation. She didn't know this man, but she knew the respect in his voice, the safety in his touch, and the fierce, undeniable protection he had just cast over her. With a slight trembling nod, she let the most dangerous man in the country lead her out of the darkness. The heavy iron-reinforced doors of the Vitiello estate, a sprawling Gothic fortress tucked into the isolated wind-whipped cliffs of Montauk, shut out the howling gales of the Atlantic Ocean. Nora stood frozen in the grand foyer, the ambient echoes of the massive hall painting a picture of staggering, unimaginable wealth in her mind. She still clutched the tarnished silver lion pendant to her chest like a lifeline. Luciano guided her gently toward a plush velvet sofa in the study, his sheer presence a towering shield against the terrifying unknown. For 15 agonizing years, she had survived on mere scraps, navigating a cruel world determined to break her spirit. Now, she was wrapped in a luxurious cashmere blanket, sipping hot, fragrant Earl Grey tea handed to her by Matteo, Luciano's stoic and utterly silent lieutenant. Luciano sat opposite her, the heavy leather armchair groaning under his muscular weight. He had shed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt to reveal skin inked with the violent, bloody history of his ruthless rise to power. Your father, Lorenzo Leonardi, was an absolute king in this city, Luciano began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through the polished floorboards. He controlled the eastern ports. My father controlled the west. We were family in every sense of the word. The night the Leonardi compound burned to the ground, the corrupt police claimed it was a tragic electrical failure. The underworld whispered it was the Moretti cartel making a power play. But I never believed either of those lies. Nora's hands trembled against the warm porcelain teacup. I remember the smell of smoke, she whispered, her milky blue eyes staring blankly into the darkness. I remember my mother screaming in the hallway. My father rushed into my room, placed this heavy necklace around my neck, shoved me into the laundry chute, and told me to run and never look back. When I finally woke up, I was chained to a bed in a charity hospital. The doctors bluntly told me the extreme heat and toxic chemical smoke had permanently seared my optic nerves. I was thrown into the foster system as a Jane Doe. Luciano's jaw tightened, a lethal, suffocating silence filling the vast room. He reached across the glass coffee table, his large, calloused hand completely covering her trembling, scraped fingers. The system failed you, Eleonora, but I swear on my life, I will not. I have brought someone very important to see you. Footsteps echoed briskly across the marble floor. A man carrying a crisp, clinical scent approached the sofa. Miss Leonardi, I am Dr. Harrison, the chief of neuro-ophthalmology at Johns Hopkins Hospital. A gentle, professional voice spoke. Mr. Vitiello flew me in via his private jet an hour ago. We have been meticulously reviewing your childhood medical records, which Matteo recently extracted from the deeply buried city archives. Extracted? Nora asked, a faint, nervous smile touching her pale lips. Persuaded the head archivist to release, Luciano corrected smoothly, a hint of dark amusement in his tone. Dr. Harrison has found something extraordinary. Your blindness, Dr. Harrison explained, sitting down in an adjacent chair, was entirely caused by severe thermal inflammation and swelling, not complete optic nerve death, as previously diagnosed by those incompetent charity doctors. With the miraculous advancements in modern reconstructive microsurgery, there is a very solid 70% chance we can completely restore your vision, but it will require immediate aggressive surgical intervention. Nora gasped loudly, the delicate teacup rattling violently against its saucer. To see again? to witness the golden sunrise, to read actual sheet music on a piano, to finally see the face of the terrifying, gentle man who had pulled her from the abyss of humiliation. It felt like a cruel, impossible dream. Is it really possible? After 15 years, with Luciano personally backing the procedure, you will have the absolute greatest surgical team on the planet, Dr. Harrison assured her confidently. But just as a tiny spark of hope bloomed in Nora's chest, the heavy mahogany doors of the study violently burst open. Matteo stormed into the room, his heavy combat boots hammering the floorboards. "Boss, we have a massive problem," Matteo barked, his tone completely devoid of its usual deadpan calm. "The hidden tracker we placed on the Moretti cartel's underground communication lines just pinged wildly. They know she's alive. The vicious gossip from the Kensington gala spread faster than a wildfire through the 5 boroughs. But that's not even the worst part of this mess." Luciano stood up slowly, the temperature in the room seemingly dropping by 10 degrees. "Speak." "The immediate hit order didn't come from the Morettis," Matteo grimaced, holding up an encrypted tablet. "We just intercepted the massive wire transfer, paying for the elite mercenary hit squad currently surrounding this very estate. The bloody money came directly from a highly secure offshore account belonging to your Uncle Carmine." A deafening, horrified silence paralyzed the room. Carmine Vitiello. The man who had acted as Luciano's trusted mentor, the man who had publicly grieved Lorenzo Leonardi the loudest at his empty funeral. The shocking twist slammed into Luciano with the devastating force of a runaway freight train. Carmine hadn't just orchestrated the assassination attempt on Nora tonight. He had ruthlessly ordered the fire 15 years ago to completely eliminate the Leonardis and seize absolute control of the syndicates, conveniently blaming the rival cartel to flawlessly cover his treacherous tracks. "Lock down the entire estate," Luciano commanded, his voice utterly devoid of humanity. It was the terrifying voice of the Butcher of New York. "Arm every single man. Dr. Harrison, take Eleonora down to the underground reinforced vault. Now." Deafening gunfire shattered the serene, moonlit Montauk night. The rhythmic, terrifying staccato of automatic weapons echoed violently through the thick stone walls of the historic estate. Deep down in the reinforced steel vault, Nora huddled desperately in the corner, her hands clamped tightly over her ears. Dr. Harrison paced nervously back and forth, clutching a heavy trauma medical bag. Every explosive tremor in the concrete floor sent a massive spike of terror through Nora's fragile heart. Luciano was up there, brutally fighting a bloody war that had actually started when she was just an innocent child. A vicious war for her stolen bloodline. Minutes slowly bled into agonizing hours. The relentless gunfire gradually ceased, replaced by a suffocating, heavy, and ominous silence. Then suddenly, the heavy steel door of the underground vault hissed open. Footsteps, incredibly slow and heavy, descended the concrete stairs. Nora severely strained her heightened, sensitive ears. The gait was uneven and dragging. Someone was badly hurt. "Luciano!" she called out, her voice cracking desperately in the dark. "I'm right here, Principessa," came his extremely rough, exhausted reply. He smelled heavily of burnt cordite, metallic copper, and cold rain. He collapsed heavily onto the reinforced steel bench right beside her, his breathing alarmingly shallow. Nora frantically reached out, her hands frantic as they brushed against his ruined, torn suit jacket. Her trembling fingers immediately came away wet and sticky. Blood. "You're shot!" she cried out in sheer panic. Dr. Harrison rushed forward instantly, tearing open Luciano's ruined shirt to rapidly apply heavy pressure to a nasty, bleeding wound on his upper shoulder. "It's absolutely nothing," Luciano grunted, leaning his head back against the cold, damp concrete wall. He reached out carefully with his good arm, pulling Nora extremely close to his uninjured side. "Carmine is dead. The men who burn and your beautiful home are dead. The restless ghosts of our past have finally been buried tonight." Nora buried her tear-stained face deep into his chest, inhaling the comforting scent of the incredible man who had ripped heaven and earth apart to avenge her family. "You risked absolutely everything just for me," she sobbed uncontrollably. "I would gladly burn this entire wretched city to ash before I ever let anyone touch you again," he whispered fiercely, pressing a deep, lingering kiss to the crown of her dark hair. "Tomorrow, we fix your beautiful eyes. Then you will finally see the magnificent empire that rightfully belongs to you." 6 months later. The ultra-private VIP recovery suite at Manhattan Medical Center smelled strongly of fresh white lilies and sterile cotton. Nora sat nervously on the edge of the adjustable hospital bed, her hands gripping the mattress edge so tightly her knuckles were completely white. Today was finally the day. The bandages were permanently coming off. Dr. Harrison stood calmly before her, carefully snipping the thick surgical gauze tightly wrapping her eyes. "Keep them firmly closed until I tell you to open them, Eleonora. The harsh light will be incredibly jarring at first." Nora nodded eagerly, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. She felt the heavy, incredibly warm and comforting presence of Luciano standing right beside her. He hadn't left her hospital side for 6 entire months. He had aggressively managed his entire criminal empire from her hospital room, eventually trading his dangerous weapons for legal documents, and slowly dismantled his illegal operations to build a fully legitimate future for them both. The very last layer of gauze fell away. "All right," Dr. Harrison said softly. "Slowly, gently open them." Nora took an incredibly deep, shuddering breath. Her long eyelashes fluttered rapidly. At first there was only a blinding, painful and pure white light. She squinted fiercely, hot tears immediately springing to her sensitive eyes. Slowly, agonizingly, the fractured, blurry light coalesced into sharp, distinct shapes. Bright colors bled vividly into the sterile white room. The vibrant green of the lilies, the polished silver of the medical instruments. And then him. Nora slowly turned her head. Kneeling perfectly beside her bed, exactly as he had respectfully done on the cold marble floor of the Pierre Hotel, was Luciano Vitiello. She saw the flawless bespoke suit. She saw the thick, dark, slightly messy hair. And finally, she traced the jagged, faded scar running down his strong cheek, a bold testament to his brutal survival, just like her lion pendant. His dark, intense eyes were completely filled with an emotion so incredibly profound, so devastatingly tender, it instantly took her breath away. She reached out gracefully, her trembling, delicate fingertips gently brushing against the rough scar on his jawline. It wasn't just a blind touch in the terrifying darkness anymore. She truly saw him, the terrifying monster to the world, the beautiful savior to her. "Luciano," she breathed, a radiant, tearful smile beautifully breaking across her face. He quickly caught her hand, pressing his warm lips deeply to her palm. "Hello, Principessa." The blind girl who had been mocked by the world was blind no more. She still proudly wore the lion's heart around her neck, but as she looked deeply into the eyes of the Mafia King, she knew she had successfully captured his heart as well. Together, they ruled the city not from the shadows, but in the blinding light. If you absolutely loved this gripping story of vengeance, unyielding devotion, and shocking twists, drop a like and let us know your favorite moment in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that share button so your friends can experience the drama, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, pulse-pounding romance stories every single week. Your support helps us bring more incredible tales to life. Stay tuned for the next video.